Religion has understood God, but forgets how God interacts with the world, which is through consciousness. Then you have science, which understands consciousness, but doesn't understand God. So they're both missing those vital parts. And that's what we've established scientifically, is the link between God, consciousness, and matter. We have over 6,000 experiments. We have not had a single failed experiment.
Meet Dahryn Trivedi, an enlightened spiritual master and globally recognized speaker known for her divine blessings that bridge science and higher consciousness. Her work has been studied through thousands of scientific experiments and published in peer-reviewed journals worldwide. Today, Dahryn will help us unlock our deeper well-being, clarity, and transformation. Religion is something that a lot of people believe in across the globe, but spirituality is not the same as religion, and science is something which is totally different. Is there a correlation between the three?
Religion has lost its integrity.
And
right?
why is that?
When you remove science, you remove integrity. Science is not just an institution. Science is the objective mind.
So when you give this divine blessing to an individual, is it supposed to be targeted at a certain challenge that the person is going through in his or her life? Or is it something that is going to tackle every area of their lives?
It's inherently intelligent. It's the divine. God knows everything. Consciousness is fundamental force of all of life. It knows your life. It's the one that programmed your life.
Does it also depend on the level of faith the recipient has?
Do non-living materials have a faith or a belief? Do microorganisms have a faith or a belief? What about plants and trees, bacteria, viruses, fungi? None of these things have belief systems. They all get transformed with the effect of this blessing. While science is incapable of directly measuring consciousness, there's no technology available that can directly measure consciousness.
Would you give me an example of how these experiments work?
One testimony I love to share is from my personal assistant. She lived her whole life with a very severe autoimmune condition called Crohn's disease. In order to save her life, they had to remove her colon. She's using the bathroom 30 times a day, right? No ability to control it. So she's highly depressed, full of anxiety. Her mental health got so bad she was suicidal so many times. She started questioning the nature of God and God's existence at that point. After the blessing, she uses the bathroom 3 to 4 times a day now. Zero pain, zero inflammation. She hasn't been to the hospital in years. We're effecting changes that are so revolutionary. We've had issues publishing these studies. What happened with this recent publication that we try to get published in a very high-profile journal?
Do you think somewhere we are headed towards like a global annihilation?
Yeah.
Good to meet you. So good to meet you too. Really tall.
I know.
How tall are you?
About 5'11".
That's wonderful.
I can. And I don't remember the question, so I don't know where I was going.
That's good. Hi, Dahryn.
Hello.
So happy to have you on Candid Confessions.
I'm very happy to be here.
And I'm looking forward to learning a lot from you today.
Thank you.
Why don't we start by telling my viewers a little bit about yourself?
What I do is basically I co-lead an organization, a nonprofit called Divine Connection International. It is founded by my husband, who is also my guru, Guruji Trivedi. And basically what this organization does, is we are establishing a scientific database for the existence of God and consciousness.
Oh.
Right. We're integrating the link between how God, consciousness, and matter are all interlinked, how they work together. And on top of that, and as well as providing this scientific database by conducting our own experiments through divine blessings, right? We're also providing real tangible solutions for people struggling with their health, their quality of life, their relationships, their finances, just any area of life, mental, emotional health problems. We actually have memberships and things that we provide for these people, solutions for them that, they have not found anywhere else by other conventional methodologies, by even other alternative and complementary therapies. So that's what our organization is. It has a really big mission. It's not limited to just human health, but we're also working to establish a new scientific paradigm, an evolutionary science, a preventative model of healthcare, right? We obviously have the establishing science with consciousness and the divine. But on top of that, we are also working to create new materials to advance our technology, which we found that these blessings are also capable of transforming non-living materials.
Oh.
We're actually creating, new agriculture. We're creating bioavailable and highly nutritious food products without the use of toxic chemicals or fertilizers, right? Something that science has not been able to provide or find an answer for. And so we're actually a multifaceted organization that touches upon various different projects here and there. But one, obviously very dear to our hearts is helping people and their suffering and improve their quality of life, which is a very big part of our organization. And what led me to that, like I said, my husband is the founder. So it was basically my journey meeting this incredible enlightened being on this planet. That began from a very young age, I'd like to say. I grew up with a very religious and spiritual household. My whole family, very Christian upbringing. I went to church all the time. My father was a choir director at church. And on top of that, my mother was also very spiritual and open-minded. She had a miraculous experience in the past, which led her to try out a variety of different things, different alternative therapies and modalities. So I had a very open-ended, relationship with God and religion and spirituality from a very early age. But one thing that I didn't have context for was these experiences that I had from, as early as I can remember.
What kind of experiences?
These experiences I like to call were more like direct experiences with God, where it existed outside of the context of conventional religion or anything I'd really read about in a book or heard, pastors or ministers or anybody talk about. And it was these incredible moments as a child. I was in this state of just deep stillness and peace. And in those moments, it was like my being, my entirety of my being, my awareness, my consciousness, everything felt like it was overwhelmed and absorbed into something bigger than myself. I felt like I had dissolved into something. I felt like my whole being, everything dissolved. And in that state, it's like this incredible ecstasy starts to fill your being. It's like this bliss that permeated every cell within me, every part of me, until eventually it just felt like I dissolved completely into that.
Wow.
And so those experiences, when I came out of them or even going into them, I understood in those moments, this is God. That's what I understood God to be from a very young age before I was even told what God was. And so that for me was my whole relationship as well as my purpose, because it was the most complete, the most extraordinarily happy, the most peaceful, the greatest sense of well-being, happiness and contentment, just absolute perfection and completion. That state that I've never felt at any other time throughout my childhood or any other time in my life was in that state. And so for me, I felt like there's no purpose beyond this. This is the peak of life. Whatever this experience is, this must be what life is about, is to have these experiences to interact with whatever I'm interacting with in this moment. And so my whole life was basically, waiting for that next experience.
And how often did you have these experiences?
From very early on, they happened relatively frequently, like maybe, once every few months, which
Wow.
is pretty frequently for that kind of experience. But the thing is, and maybe they would happen like just for a couple hours at a time.
Okay.
They'd kind of come and go. They'd fade away after a while, maybe after a day or two. But what always left me, when those experiences faded, is this incredible feeling of longing and loneliness. It was like a soul sickness, because it was like I had touched upon something that was so essentially, life, that I felt like I finally connected with something that was the true meaning of life. And then it just kind of disappeared from my grasp. And so in those moments where it kind of disappeared, this incredible longing and soul sickness filled me. And so, as well as this incredible love, I had an incredible sense of love and joy with life, but this longing to have more of those experiences,
I
to
can
find
only
God.
imagine actually when you're talking about it,
Yeah.
it's giving me goosebumps, and I'm kind of getting mesmerized with just listening about this experience.
Right.
I cannot even imagine what you must have felt and what you feel when you go through these experiences. But a lot of things that you're talking about are things that I've never heard about before.
Right.
Like scientific experiments and correlating them with consciousness
Right.
and blessings and divine blessings, which can actually help agriculture, also human beings and their suffering. So, would you like to tell me a little bit more about what exactly a divine blessing is?
So, a divine blessing is when an enlightened being, right? What consciousness does is it organizes and evolves you, right? So, when people are a very unique entity on this planet with their capability of evolution is essentially unlimited. So they are one of those unique entities that can evolve themselves beyond the consciousness of nature. And we call that state enlightenment.
Okay.
Right. So in that state of enlightenment, they have, you could say, a unique type of access to the divine. Right? Because they're not within the bounds of nature. Now they're outside of those bounds. They're within the bounds of a creator force and authority, right? The essence of creation, right? Something divine. And so in that place, their consciousness being merged in that place, right? They have this ability to pray to that authority, right? It's like their prayers are heard, their prayers are answered. And in that state, right, they request to that authority, to the divine, that, please evolve the consciousness of whatever the recipient may be, whether it's a non-living material, a living organism, a human, right? Basically just, let your grace, work here, let it evolve whatever the recipient is. And that consciousness always evolves that recipient for its higher functioning, its better usefulness, its greater efficiency on this planet, no matter what the recipient is. So that's how the blessing works. It's basically just an evolution of consciousness happening from, divine grace.
So when you give this divine blessing to an individual, is it supposed to be targeted at a certain challenge that the person is going through in his or her life? Or is it something that is going to tackle every area of their lives?
It's inherently intelligent. It's the divine. God knows everything. Consciousness is fundamental force of all of life. It knows your life. It's the one that programmed your life. It's the one that governs and regulates it. It knows all of your problems already, right? So this consciousness we found throughout all of our experiments. We have over 6,000 experiments, and we found in each and every single one of them, we have not had a single failed experiment. I'm not saying 6,010 of them have been successful. 6,000 and every single one of them have been successful. And all of these experiments, they demonstrate something unique about consciousness because we're applying the same concept to every experiment. We're not targeting a different pathway. We're not applying a new mechanism or a new technique or a new practice. It's the same blessing for everything. But that intelligent energy knows how to treat a crop versus a non-living material versus a microbe versus a person. We see, I have no need. We have clinical trials, double-blinded. Like, we have no idea who the recipients are, what their problems are, anything about them. And this energy has an intelligence to know all of your problems as well as the solution.
And sometimes you would say that the person himself doesn't know what exactly the problem is.
Exactly.
But it just gets hit at the right chord. But tell me, when you're giving this blessing, is it like a procedure, a ritual? What exactly is
No,
to be done?
It's an inherent connection.
Is it like you go in a meditative state? Is it done remotely, or do you need the person present?
No, it can be done remotely or in the presence, but essentially there's no trick or technique or practice behind it. None of that is absolutely required. It's simply, grace. It's that connection to the divine that all of us inherently have, but all we're really doing is building that connection, strengthening it. And then through that divine grace, there's this evolution that happens within each and every one of us. And all these problems that that exist in our day-to-day lives, everything that we face is simply an indication of lower levels of consciousness. All problems problems exist from low levels of consciousness, a low state of evolution within us. So to get rid of these problems, all we have to do is evolve that consciousness, and that consciousness knows how to treat everything. So it's kind of like I give darkness and light as an example. Darkness doesn't exist. It's just the absence of something. So darkness is the absence of light. Higher consciousness is that light in our lives that kicks out all the problems that we have. So all we must do is evolve our consciousness. There is no trick or technique that can evolve it. Consciousness came from the Creator. Right? It is the substrate of our existence. It's the fundamental force of our lives. Matter is derived from that. Our thoughts are derived from matter, right? All of these things that happen in our lives, they're all derivatives. They all flow downstream from consciousness. So anything that you do downstream is not going to affect anything upstream. Right? God created life through consciousness. Only God is the authority that can affect consciousness. So you have to appease that authority. It's only through that divine authority that we can make changes at the level of consciousness, which is why you need a guru or an enlightened being who has that connection inherently.
And if I'm working with you as a guru,
Right.
To get the blessing, to change my life,
Right.
is it also something that I can learn in the process?
I wouldn't say it's a learning more as it is, like I said, it's a development. It's a spiritual evolution. There is some aspect of nurturing because there's so much that we've learned and adopted in these lives, especially this concept of practice and effort, provides this kind of outcome for us, right? So there's a lot of unlearning, I would say, a lot of nurturing about the nature of the divine. I call them the divine principles and fundamentals. It's like a restoration of our natural blueprint. And that natural blueprint is purity and innocence. That's who we are inherently. And life has a way of twisting that, or I like to say it's kind of like creating a coating around this essence within us that makes it hard for us to connect to it or feel it or be able to tap into it. And so basically this nurturing as well as these divine blessings help restore that vitality. They help restore that divine presence. They help restore our true nature of innocence and purity, and they help evolve us into higher levels of consciousness.
And how would you, just to ask a little more technically,
Sure.
if I ask you to bless me, how long does it take? Are there like number of sessions?
Moments.
Okay.
And for every person, the number of sessions, you could say it depends on the individual. So we have many testimonials and experiences from people who they have problems that resolved after one blessing. We have people who maybe their deterioration is a little more severe, right? So in these cases, maybe it takes a little more time for them. Ultimately, we've never had a case where a blessing doesn't have an outcome. It's usually always has an outcome, but it's dependent upon that person's circumstances, their life, what they're going through. I like to give an example of like a scale from like negative 100 to 0 to 100, right? So depending on where you are on that spectrum, you could be a negative 100 or negative 5. If you're only at negative 5, one blessing might be enough to boost you, to evolve you to the point where you're at maybe positive 5, and you experience, some of the benefits of consciousness instead of just the reprieve of suffering. Whereas from negative 100, maybe it's reprieve, right? You're evolving, you're slowing down the deterioration, and eventually you're rebuilding your system, you're rebuilding, your biology, your physiology. All of these things need to be rebuilt, right? Everything needs to be detoxified and purged. And eventually after that, you start to really experience the true benefits. And it's not that the benefits aren't happening. It's just like what we experience as benefits right away compared to other people. It might be noticeable in different ways with other people sooner.
And does it also depend on the level of faith the recipient has?
No, absolutely not.
Even if you're, blessing somebody who doesn't believe what is happening, it'll affect them as well. It'll benefit them as well.
Yes.
Okay.
Here's the thing. So this is why we're establishing this scientifically, because for so long, God has been limited to faith alone. Right? And we're saying that if God is real, if God created all of life, if God created you and me, God also created the room we're sitting in, the microphones, all these materials we're using, right? Our oxygen, plant life, everything, all things, right? Because that's the origin story of all religion is God created everything out of nothing. Nothing existed before except God, and from God's own existence, everything was created. God created the universe and all its creation through God's grace, right, to experience the glory of God, right? That's the story that all religion refers to as. So God is the essence of all of us, right? If that's true, then God should be an empirical reality. God should be a fact-based reality. But nobody has been able to take it. Nobody from the realm of faith-based, understanding of life has been able to take God and measure God in a laboratory, take God and measure consciousness, validate its effects. And we're saying that's not correct. You should be able to do that. We agree with the reason why scientists have been disregarding placebo and psychology and human experience in all these testimonials. I feel like science is very legitimate in
So would you give me an example of how these experiments work?
Absolutely. And I also want to say that, do non-living materials have a faith or a belief? Do microorganisms have a faith or a belief? Right? What about plants and trees, bacteria, viruses, fungi? None of these things have belief systems. They all get transformed with the effect of this blessing. Okay. So that's evidence to the contrary, that you don't need a pre-established belief or faith in God. Because what does a metal or ceramic or a polymer have faith in? We don't know. Right. And we have many experiences. My personal assistant is one of them, who used to be an atheist before she came, met us, received a blessing, transformed her life. And now that affirmed her faith and belief in the divine and a God. And so how these experiments work is, we've conducted 6,000 experiments, like I said, in multiple different disciplines of science, life sciences and, non-living materials, material science. We've conducted it with agriculture, microbes, bacteria, viruses, fungi. We've dealt with, animals as well. We've done it on plants, seeds, trees, soil. And then we've also conducted experiments on non-living materials, metals, ceramics, polymers, chemicals, organic and inorganic compounds. And what we do is, and we've also conducted 4 clinical trials on human health and well-being. And what we do essentially is, while science is incapable of directly measuring consciousness, there's no technology available that can directly measure consciousness. It's like, it's like the wind. It's invisible by nature, but you can measure its effects, right? You see the wind blowing in a tree, you can recognize the wind's there. Right? So in the same way, that's how we conduct these experiments, is that we cannot measure consciousness directly, but we can measure its impact. Okay. We can measure its effects. And so that's what we do, is we apply these blessings to all these different areas and disciplines of science. And through the application of these blessings, we always have a control group as well to measure, the comparative difference between a control group that's not receiving the blessing. And in the cases of psychological influence, we also have a placebo, psychological control group, to measure, because placebo, there are differences between control as well as placebo and psychological groups. So we take both of those groups and then we compare it with the treated group. And I'm not talking about like a simple, plant in our backyard. I'm not talking about like a little tree or anything like that, or small groups measuring only trivial and subjective parameters, like most of these, a lot of, unfortunately, religious figureheads and transformational leaders have been able to skew some of the data for their followers and develop these very limited scientific protocols that don't actually say much over time. If you do those kind of trivial experiments for very small groups of people over very short periods of time, you can associate, lower blood pressure with smoking with that kind of protocol, right? But if you actually conduct it over a long enough period of time with enough people, you can actually see a correlation between smoking and increased blood pressure, right? So those are the problems with those kinds of experiments. What we do, we have all the gold standards using all the most sophisticated technologies used by NASA to measure the outcomes of these experiments. And then we have the proper protocols, materials, and methods that are used by science, all scientific methods today. And then like agriculture, for example, we're doing acreage. We're doing acreage of blessed treated groups mixed in with, the control groups as well. So you can't even say it's the plot of land. There's something unique about where it's planted in or any of that. The environment's different.
Yeah.
No, we're getting rid of all the subjective data, all the possible biases or influences that could possibly account for any of the outcomes we see. And on top of that, the results are so unprecedented by that even conventional methods, whatever methodologies, alternative, complementary, conventional, whatever we have available today, has not been able to produce the kind of results that we have seen with our studies. Our science is so legitimate. We have over 6,000 science experiments, but this has led to over 670 peer-reviewed science publications. That's the gold standard, right? And they have been indexed, right, all over the world in over 3,000 universities in over 100 countries. Sorry, I'll say that one more time. Indexed in over 3,000 universities in over 100 countries. And I'm talking about universities like Harvard, Cambridge, MIT, right, Oxford, as well as the National Institutes of Health in America. So, right, we are widely recognized as authorities in this area of consciousness science.
Religion is something that a lot of people believe in across the globe.
Right.
But spirituality is not the same as religion.
No.
Right?
No.
And science is something which is totally different. Is there a correlation between the three?
Yes. And I feel like a lot of times they think they're all operating separately from each other. But it's kind of like if you take a droplet of water from the ocean, right, and you separate its different components and you make them think that they're all separate from each other, right? They're all in reality describing the same thing, right? They're all just coming from different approaches, different perspectives, but all of them compose one reality. They're all defining consciousness in a different way.
Okay.
Right? So science is the discovery of consciousness. Religion is the adoption of it, and spirituality is the expression of it.
Oh.
Right? So all of them actually work, right, in perfect harmony with each other when they understand the context that they're in. When they lose that important context, like science, for example, has lost that context, right? That important factor, that missing link, right, between right, how consciousness operates with the material world and where it comes from. Because of that, we assume that consciousness is derivative, right, of matter. It's a byproduct of the brain. And that's the very root cause of science's inability to address our most pressing problems that we see worldwide, right, at pandemic level proportions, like our mental health crisis, our agricultural pandemic with all these, toxic food systems and inability to provide nutritious, high quality food, as well as inability to advance our current technology. We're in an age of AI. Technology is at the need of huge advancements, but we don't have the proper materials to be able to execute the proper and quick utilization of that kind of advancements. So without applying consciousness and being able to somehow put that in the context of God, right, we're actually find ourselves at limitations, and more than limitations, we find ourselves at breakdown level. We find that all of our systems of our modern world are starting to collapse in on themselves, and that's for the very sole reason that we have ignored the true nature of what it means to be a human, what life is, its origin being consciousness, and consciousness coming from God, from an authority, a divine creator on this planet.
I think also to a certain extent at loggerheads, because science is always believed to be the opposite of God.
Right.
It's just believed to be the opposite of, it's just logic. And God is something which is not logical. So would you also say that religion also has somewhere lost that context that you're talking about?
Absolutely. Religion has lost its integrity.
And
Right?
why is that?
Well, so for so long, science and religion were actually not separate. Right? Eons ago, they were actually united. They were
How's
worked
that?
together. Right? This is before the time of Galileo. A lot of ancient civilizations, science and religion worked together to advance our societies and our technology. Right? God was infused in the very nature of life and phenomena and discovery. Right? And so when that really when science and religion reached a divide, which was after the time of Galileo properly, right? Science began, constructing the world and its viewpoint, its paradigm of the world based upon a materialistic perspective, right? Mechanical and chemical. And then we have religion, which because of its inability to prove, right? It's been very futile in its ability to take God, take something that is supposedly omnipresent, omniscient, and prove that scientifically. And so as a result, religion claims to have a bunch of things that can optimize human potential, transform your fate and fortune, but is unable to take those methodologies, prove them scientifically, right? As a result, it's been limiting itself to a faith-based status. When you remove science, you remove integrity. Science is not just an institution. Science is the objective mind. Science is scrutiny. Science is skepticism. Science is a healthy mind when it's conducted properly. And so science and religion should be held together. Science provides integrity that religion has lost. So that's where you see all the charlatans, all the con artists. You see all these people who rush in, especially in spirituality, with the wellness industry, all these, people who are promoting, in fact, very dangerous tactics and practices that can actually harm human health.
For example?
Oh, there are so many things, and useless protocols as well. It's like we were taught that lemon water for a long time could cure cancer, right? Celery juice. You have people who stopped taking cancer treatments and everything because they thought just drinking lemon juice every day could cure their cancer, right? There are a lot of things that science can't properly fix and address, right? So everybody runs to the wellness industry to find a solution because it acknowledges something that exists with human nature that science hasn't properly touched upon or addressed. So we run to wellness because it's touched upon, it's talked about there at the very least. We feel seen and heard, especially women. Women are actually one of the major consumers of the wellness industry, even more so than men. And unfortunately, that's because women have been disregarded scientifically for decades because all of the major science that we have today has been conducted on male physiology, male bodies. We've been treated, our physiologies have been assumed and inferred based upon males' physiologies. So we're assumed to just be men with breasts, as if there's nothing unique or different about a female's body or physiology. So we see a lot of things that are unaddressed, misdiagnosis, a lot of long-term management without any solutions within science. And so you see a lot of distrust in that institution that's developing now. A lot of people are finding distrust, or they're finding a lot of invalidation in what scientists are saying now because they see these loopholes, or they see these limits or these boundaries that science can't address. And mental health, emotional health is a huge one, right? We've seen more people are talking about mental health, right, than ever before. More people are seeking therapy. More people are taking drugs. More people are trying alternative and complementary therapies. The stigma is being decreased. And at the same time, mental health problems are increasing. They're not going away. They're not lowering. They're increasing in number more than ever before, right? Science has spent trillions of dollars, literally trillions, to try and find solutions for our modern health epidemic related to mental health. And no solutions, nothing, no answers, nothing properly. If there was an answer, we could apply it to everybody universally. It would be a conventional treatment that everybody could participate in. Instead, we have you try this, you try that, maybe this will work, maybe that. We don't have an answer. We have managing symptoms. That's what we have, a Band-Aid. Right? Something that makes us feel better.
What should be done scientifically to treat mental health? Like, does it need to come in sync with religion or spirituality and then co-create something?
They need to work together. They honestly need to work together. But that's what we've seen is consciousness is a missing link behind all of them. Right? So consciousness, there's already this theory, right, that consciousness is fundamental. Max Planck developed that theory over decades of rigorous research, right? He's a Nobel laureate, right? The father of quantum physics, right? He declared that throughout all his years of research, he came to the hypothesis, he said, I believe that consciousness is fundamental and matter is derived from consciousness. And then you have religion, right, which talks about God, right? But at the same time, doesn't properly explain how God interacts with our material world. How does God operate within our world? How does it work? We've resorted to materials and methods that seems to lack that proper context, which is why they don't work. which is why they take huge effort and time. And the younger generation sees the older generation using all these old, tricks and dogmas and practices and all these different pujas that all this older generation is following, dogmatically worshiping, and they see very little outcome. They see all the outcome in science. They're leaving religion and spirituality by the droves.
The people who are following these practices for years and years, who've lost kind of, the reason behind why these are supposed to be done. I'm sure back in the days, there must be some logic to it. Do you think people who are doing these practices without understanding the logic are still benefiting from it?
No, I feel like a lot of it is either purely psychological, or if they are benefiting, it's probably very trivial, but it's coming from something else. It's not coming from the trick or the practice inherently.
What could it be coming from? Then?
I mean, I feel like some people have this inherent connection, right? This initial purity, or that they're at a certain level of evolution in their consciousness where there's a moment in life where that kind of like that pendulum swings from one side to the other. And so that shift in consciousness is what creates the outcome. And they misattribute it to the practices and the techniques.
Is that what you call the, the different phases that the brain goes through? The gamma phase, the gamma realm, or some theta realm, or something. What are those?
No, so those are different waves or brain waves.
Okay.
What I'm talking about is before.
Okay.
Right. So brain waves, right? We could say those are produced by the brain, right? And I'm saying consciousness produces the brain. Right. So we're talking about the brain waves as if, that is something that that's a misunderstanding that science has, that these brain waves, right, is ultimately what gives us this conscious experience, this awareness, and that is consciousness.
Oh.
And what we're saying is consciousness is something bigger than that. It's a divinely intelligent energy, right, that is coming before that. I like to say it's the DNA of our DNA. Right. It is the program of our existence. It's the substrate and the program that gives our life whatever it is today. It tells a cell what it will become. It gives the destiny of a cell, the destiny of an atom. You change the consciousness in the atom, you change the atom. You don't change the atom to change the consciousness in the atom. Right. We've done that with our scientific experiments by simply changing the consciousness in the atom. The entire structure of the atom changes as a result. Right. And so what is missing, right, is this link of consciousness. So religion, right, has understood God, but forgets how God interacts with the world, which is through consciousness. Then you have science, which understands consciousness, but doesn't understand God, right? So they're both missing those vital parts. And that's what we've established scientifically is the link between God, consciousness, and matter, right? And so what we're doing is we're creating a new scientific paradigm. We're ushering in a new type of science on this planet, something revolutionary that can answer and provide real solutions to all of our problems that we see today, literally all of them. And then we're also giving religion its integrity back. The people that abuse, the people that manipulate, maybe even with good intention, right? Ultimately, if the substance isn't there, it's giving false hope. So we're actually providing the integrity back to something that has lost its integrity, which is why so many people have left it, right? So we're doing something that will revolutionize all of them and bring it all together and make them integrate and work together to evolve, right? To grow, to optimize the potential of humanity, the conditions of our world as we see it.